All right, we are going to look at solving and graphing some two-step linear inequalities here. So first problem we have here is 17 is greater than x over 3 plus 16. So the first thing I need to do is I'm going to put some lines here on my greater than symbol to remind myself that I've got two sides to this inequality. Okay, I want to get the x all by itself. The first thing I can get rid of on the side with the x is that 16. So the opposite of adding 16 is subtracting 16. 17 minus 16 is 1. It's still greater. And all I have left over here on the right side now is the x over 3. Okay? So now I need to get the x by itself, I need to get rid of this dividing by 3. So the opposite of dividing by 3 is multiplying by 3. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 3. Whatever I do to one side, I have to do to the other. Okay, so 3 times 1 is 3. And then over here on the right side, the 3's cancel each other out. I'm left with the x. So I have 3 is greater than x. Now when I write my inequalities, what I like to do is I always like to have the x or the variable on the left side. So I'm just going to turn this thing around. So instead of 3 greater than x, it's going to be x less than 3. Okay? Notice the inequality symbol still points to the x and it still opens up to the 3. Okay? So you got to keep that the same. That's why we have to switch the sign around. So here's our solution. So x less than 3, the less than means it's an open dot. We have an open point. And your inequality symbol and your arrow on your graph will always point in the same direction as long as the x is on the left side of your inequality. So this turns out to be graph A. We've got an open dot on 3, and our arrow on our graph is pointing to the left. Okay, going down to the next one here. We've got 24 less than or equal to negative 4x plus 28. Okay, again, the first thing I am going to do is get rid of that plus 28. Okay, so I'm going to put my lines here, remind myself whatever I do on one side, I have to do to the other. Subtract the 28. Okay, 24 minus 28 is going to be negative 4. It's still less than or equal to. All I have left on the right side is the negative 4x. So now I have negative 4 less than or equal to negative 4x. My next step here is going to be undo the multiplying the x by negative 4. So to undo multiplying the x by negative 4, I'm going to divide by negative 4. Now with an inequality, so negative 4 divided by negative 4 is 1. With an inequality, whenever you multiply or divide both sides by a negative, so because I'm dividing both sides by this negative 4, I need to switch the sign. So what happens there is instead of less than or equal to, I need to change it to greater than or equal to. My negative 4's cancel each other out. I'm left with x. Now, just like number 1, because the x is not on the left, I'm going to switch that around. So instead of 1 greater than or equal to x, I'm going to change this to x less than or equal to 1. Now, the less than or equal to means that on the 1, I need a solid point because it's less than or equal to, and my arrow is going to point to the left. Because again, my arrow is going to point in the same direction that my inequality symbol points. Okay? All right, moving on to number 3 here. Now this one's a little bit different. We've got the x plus 45 in the top of the fraction, and then that's all divided by 2. So the first thing I need to undo in this one is that dividing by 2. So to undo dividing by 2, I need to multiply both sides by 2. When I do that on the left side, okay, on the left side, my 2's will cancel out, and I'm just left with be x plus 45. Still greater than or equal to, and 19 times 2 is 38. Now all I need to do is subtract the 45 from both sides. We got a different color here for you. And I get x greater than or equal to, and 38 minus 45 is negative 7. Okay, this time my x is already on the left, so I've got nothing to worry about there. So the greater than or equal to tells me that that's going to be a solid point on the negative 7, and it's going to point to the right. So letter B, you see, has a solid point on negative 7, and it's pointing to the right. All right, moving on here to sum with decimals. Same idea, you're just dealing with some decimals here. So negative 10.7 less than x divided by 0.1 plus 0.3. I'm going to put my lines on my inequality symbol to separate the sides of my inequality. First thing I'm going to do is subtract the 0.3 from both sides. Now when you take negative 10.7 minus 0.3, you are going to get negative 11. It's still less than. We have x over 0.1. Okay? Now, what I have to get rid of yet is that 0.1. So the opposite of dividing by 0.1 is going to be multiplying by 0.1. So I need to take and multiply both sides by 0.1. When I do that on the left side here, I get negative 1.1. Okay, it's still less than, and I get x. Now again with this one, I want to keep my x on the left side, so I'm going to flip it around and say x is greater than negative 1.1. Okay, so it's just a greater than symbol, so this is going to be an open dot, and it's going to point to the right, and it's going to be on negative 1.1. So negative 1.1, open dot, pointing to the right, that is letter A. Okay, one last one here, number 2. Okay, this one, we've got negative 0.1 less than x over 0.2 plus 0.9. Okay? Now this time, the x over 0.2 is by itself, and then you take that, divide, and add the 0.9. So the first thing I need to do here is subtract that 0.9. Okay, when I take negative 0.1 minus 0.9, I get negative 1. It's less than x over 0.2. Last step here is to it's x divided by 0.2, so to get rid of the division, I multiply by 0.2 on both sides. Okay, when we do that, if I take 0.2 times negative 1, I'm going to get negative 0.2. It's going to be less than, and all we're going to have left here is the x. Okay, now again, I want to keep my x on the left side, so I'm going to switch this one around. Instead of negative 0.2 less than x, I'm going to make it x greater than negative 0.2. So I need an open circle on negative 0.2, and I need an arrow pointing to the right, because that's the direction that the inequality symbol is pointing. So negative 0.2 is right here. There's my open circle, and I need to point my arrow to the right. Okay? That means all those values would make this inequality true.